When we talk about the capabilities of the maritime forces of the Third Reich, known as the Kriegsmarine, the legendary U-boats, battleships and destroyers come to mind. But the ambitions of the German army went much further. In the naval plans there was an objective that could never be achieved: the construction of a nationally produced aircraft carrier. The project that almost saw the light of day was the KMS Graf Zeppelin. Delays in construction, decommissioning and changes in the course of the war sealed a fatal outcome for a ship that could have altered the outcome of the war. From being the weaponry jewel to a target, stay with us and find out what was the final destination of one of the most impressive projects undertaken by the Nazi Navy. Hitler had assured his navy the construction of an aircraft carrier in 1935. This is how Plan Z was born, by Admiral Erich Raeder. This program sought to strengthen the Nazi fleet with the manufacture of 4 ships of this type within a period of 9 years. Unfortunately for the Admiral, the first disappointment would come in 1939, when it was ruled that the construction would be reduced to only 2 aircraft carriers. It is important to point out that the Treaty of Versailles prohibited Germany from designing this type of ship, but, thanks to its rupture, the production of the first aircraft carrier began without problems on December 28, 1936 in the Deutsche Werktage shipyards. The engineer Wilhelm Hadeler baptized the Colossus as Graf Zeppelin, in homage to the creator of the airships Ferdinand von Zeppelin. Germany had no experience in this type of ship, so a specialized commission traveled to Japan to analyze and take note of the mechanics of the legendary aircraft carrier Akagi. This was not the only inspiration. The influence of the British ship HMS Courageous is also visible. It is believed that this lack of experience and the little collaboration received from her caused the Graf Zeppelin to run at a disadvantage compared to her rival allies. According to projections, the German aircraft carrier would have 4 steam turbines and would have a displacement of more than 23,000 tons, housing an estimated crew of 1,760 people. In addition, she would be equipped with 16 auxiliary 150mm guns and 62 anti-aircraft guns of various types in case of engagement. Still not finished, on December 8, 1938 the Graf Zeppelin was launched in the port of Kiel. It was a great ceremony in which Adolf Hitler could be seen, and even the daughter of the late Ferdinand Graf von Zeppelin, who was the guest of honor. The Colossus that filled the Kriegsmarine with pride had a great detractor, Hermann Göring himself, commander of the Luftwaffe, who maintained a reluctant attitude towards the project. He disliked that Admiral Raeder's navy had an independent aviation and, despite Hitler himself ordering him to develop aircraft for the ship, Göring put all the obstacles in his power. He offered Raeder aircraft that were already outdated at the time, such as the Stuka Ju-87 bomber and the Me-109F fighter. Despite receiving modifications, these models were not suitable for maneuvering on an aircraft carrier and, to make matters worse, Göring postponed the delivery of the aircraft until the end of 1944, a delivery that would never materialize. But what ended up condemning the Graf Zeppelin to oblivion was the war itself. At the start of World War II, its construction was slowly delayed until it finally stopped in April 1940. A true misfortune for the Kriegsmarine, which was very close to obtaining its first aircraft carrier, 85% finished when only the last touches were missing. Much to their regret, they put their expectations aside and concentrated their efforts on strengthening their naval fleet, building lethal submarines and other much cheaper and more effective ships for combat. In July 1940 the incomplete ship made its first voyage across the Baltic, away from the danger posed by Allied bombing, to finally tie up in the port of Gotenhafen. The carrier was then hidden to avoid being targeted by possible airstrikes. Just 2 years later the Graf Zeppelin was returned to the same shipyard where she had started her story. The advance of the war highlighted the importance of the aircraft carriers, with the aeronautical strategy of the Allied powers being one of the key elements for the outcome of the dispute. In 1942 it was ordered to resume the construction of the German aircraft carrier, generating structural modifications that would make it even more robust. But this second impulse would not last long. Barely 2 months later, the Führer would order the suspension of the project, again prioritizing the submarines and destroyers that had given his army such good results. Resources were scarce and the war had turned against Germany, making it no longer safe to sail an aircraft carrier across the Atlantic. Faced with this reality, the forces of the Third Reich made the drastic decision to sink the colossal Graf Zeppelin, the first and only aircraft carrier project of their regime. This was to prevent it from falling into the enemy clutches of the Soviet Union, which had been advancing more and more on Germanic areas. Later you will see that this was in vain, since the Red Army was able to take over the unfinished Nazi gem to give it a rather peculiar use. A group of 10 men commanded by Captain Wolfgang Kahler took the trouble to blow up all the equipment on board with explosives. Finally they opened its valves and ran the ship aground near the mouth of the Oder River in order to disable it. Before continuing, we want to know your opinion. Do you think that if the Graf Zeppelin had been completed it would have changed the outcome of the war? Leave us your answer in the comment box. After the surrender of Germany and the end of the war, the Soviets refloated the Graf Zeppelin and renamed it PO-101. The fate of the ship continues to generate debate and conflicting opinions to this day. The strongest version states that she was able to reach the port of Swinemund in 1947 loaded with hundreds of objects and equipment looted from factories in both Poland and Germany. After analyzing it, the Soviets came to the conclusion that the transfer of the aircraft carrier to the Soviet Union was impossible. Even so, the Red Army found a new use for the carrier that was the naval pride of the Third Reich. They used it as a practice target for future confrontations with American ships. The Soviets apparently installed aerial bombs on the flight deck, dropped bombs from planes, fired howitzers and torpedoes. Thus they complied with international treaties that stipulated the destruction of damaged enemy ships, while gaining valuable combat experience. It took 28 high-caliber shells, 16 bombs and 2 torpedoes to put an end to Nazi Germany's Graf Zeppelin forever. Undoubtedly the ending that neither Hitler nor the Kriegsmarine would have wanted. After decades of uncertain whereabouts, the aircraft carrier was found by the Polish oil company Petrobaltic in July 2006, while examining the bottom of the Baltic Sea. The Graf Zeppelin lies at a depth of 87 m, but is not a navigational hazard as its highest point is 60 m below the water surface. A team of experts plans to recover artifacts from the ship, but for now one of the most ambitious projects of the Third Reich will continue to rest on the seabed. If you liked this video, we invite you to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to learn about many more events that left their mark on history. This was all in a new episode of Military History. Thanks for staying until the end. See you in the next video.